So, hi, my name is Patrice Lisser. I am the host of Indigo Inspire Live, and welcome to a brand new season of our broadcast. For those of you who'll be watching, I have two incredible guests that are joining me: San Franklin, Grammy Award winning gospel musician, as well as pastor, and also the mother of a son that has been diagnosed with autism. I'm also joined by Eileen Lamb, who has an amazing blog called the Autism Cafe, and she chronicles her story about not only having and raising a son with profound autism, but a second son who has also been diagnosed with autism. But her story is that she's also autistic on the level 1 spectrum and was diagnosed at the age of 26. And this is going to be a very powerful story that she'll be sharing. So, first of all, ladies, thank you so much for being here on this edition of the Indigo Inspire Live. Our focus is on autism and all the things concerning what it is to have autism, as well as being the parent of a child diagnosed with autism. And so I want to start first with you, Eileen. Um, let's talk a little bit about who is Eileen Lamb.
First of all, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a great honor. So, I'm Eileen Lamb. I'm a mother of three children, two who are on the spectrum. My oldest son, Charlie, has a level 3 autism, profound autism. He has a lot of severe, challenging behaviors. He's nonverbal, intellectually disabled. And then my other son is a 10-year-old, and he's diagnosed with level 1 autism, just like myself. And I'm also an author, published author, a podcast host myself, and I'm the senior director of social media at Autism Speaks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And San, even though I did a brief introduction, but just kind of share a little bit about who you are.
Hi, my name is Dr. Sam Franklin, and I am most importantly the mother of a 20-year-old son diagnosed with autism at he was 10 years old, high functioning, low level, and so I am also one who was diagnosed not with autism but with ADHD spectrum, and so he and I walked the cure of this mental health journey together. I'm also a pastor. I'm also establishmentarian of a Love Center Global. I'm also a Grammy Award winning producer and gospel artist and background vocal arranger in the music ministry as a whole. And I'm glad to be here today to hear these wonderful stories and to keep our world abreast about the wonderful challenges of autism.
Thank you so much for sharing, both of you, about who you are. I want to just give a brief introduction as to how is it that we are talking about autism. Indigo Inspire Live is a proud supporter of Autism Speaks, and we want to give a special thank you to San, who really brought this initiative to our awareness. And by sharing her story, we were compelled to help her as well as others who have gone through the journey and still continuing through the journey and bring more light, more support, as well as assistance to helping those who are not only diagnosed with autism, but also caring for those who have been diagnosed with autism. So, first, Eileen, I want to start with you. Your role as social media director for Autism Speaks, how did that even come about?
I've always loved social media as a way to connect with other people, other parents of children with autism, other autistic people. I have my own social media channels, the Autism Cafe, but when I saw that Autism Speaks was looking for a director of social media, I knew it was the perfect job for me. I've always, related to their mission and loved the work they were doing. So when an opportunity came up, I applied for the job, and I've been at the organization for almost 4 years now, and I love what I do, and it's just the perfect match for me with my passion for social media and my personal connection to autism, being autistic myself, raising two children on the spectrum. It just made a lot of sense.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you, When you were diagnosed at the age of 26 yourself, but it says it was doing some background checking on you about, about just getting to get familiar with who you are. You said that you were noticing some signs or you knew something was a little different about just your own behavioral injury. Can you kind of expound on that a little bit for me?
Growing up, so I grew up in France, as you can hear by my accent.
It's a
I
beautiful
always felt,
accent.
thank you. I hear that a lot. As a French person, I feel very self conscious about it, but people here really love it. So I like it. Yeah, so I was always feeling different growing up in France. It was really hard for me to fit in with my peers. I had interests that were so different from other children, and I always felt different and disconnected from the world around me. But I was in France, and again, I had very good grades at school, and I got by, so nothing ever came from it, and me feeling different and not being able to do things that other kids could do just fine. It was social situations were so hard for me. Just buying a baguette bread at the bakery in France was like extremely, extremely difficult. Saying hi, looking at people in the eyes, and so nothing really happened until I moved to the US when I was 21. And then a few years later, I had my son, Charlie, who was diagnosed with autism. And that's when the pieces started falling together. Even as an adult, I still struggled, like going to the grocery store, still like really difficult for me, like connecting with people, maintaining friendships, relationships, being in crowds, attending social events, just getting gas at a different gas station than the one I'm used to is difficult for me. Like little things that
Hmm.
didn't really make sense until I saw a psychologist, and everything starting fitting together, and I was diagnosed with level 1 autism.
Can you just take us on a little journey as to what was the steps to get that diagnosis for you?
It's difficult. I'm not gonna lie, getting diagnosed as an adult. So the way I did it is I went through a therapeutic assessment, which is done by a psychologist. And I was lucky enough that in Austin we had a psychologist that specialized in autism in women, which was kind of like a perfect fit. But I didn't go into it thinking I'm gonna be diagnosed with autism. I just wanted to understand why I felt different. I mean, I had autism in the back of my mind, having a son on the spectrum, but I wasn't sure what was going on. So I went into the assessment with an open mind. And the assessment was very thorough. It was dozens of hours of interviews and tests with like family members. My husband answered some questions about me, my mom, and it was a long, long assessment. And yeah, at the end of it, I was diagnosed with high functioning autism.
So when you get a diagnosis like that, um, and not just pairing it with the fact that you have a son with profound autism, how did that kind of put the pieces together for you? Like, aha, like, okay, now I understand. And with that information that you received, how have you been able to apply that now in terms of how you, I'm going to put it, a day in the life of Eileen? What does that look like?
In a way, it was very comforting to be diagnosed, because I felt like, okay, so it's not that I'm weird, there is nothing wrong with me. There is a reason I struggle with things that other people don't even think twice, about doing. So that part was really good. But the other part of it was, well, great. I'm in my mid 20s now, and I could have gotten help like 20 years ago when I was a kid, and I never got that help. So it was a little bit frustrating to learn about it so late in life. It's always easier to get interventions when you're a child. That said, there are still ways now where it's useful for me to know that I have autism. It helps me be kinder to myself. I used to be like really, really frustrated, like going to, I don't know, take the example of like a social events, and I would see everyone like, having conversations, and I just couldn't do it. Always have to like leave events early, go into a corner where it's like not loud, and I would just feel like so out of place in the world. And now that I know why I'm like this, I feel less harsh towards myself. It's less like what's wrong with me, because that's how I felt at the time. Why can't I walk into the store and buy a gallon of milk? Like people are like enjoying grocery shopping. I see moms like on social media talking about how they go to Target for fun, and I'm like, this seems like hell for me, you know. So I
Hmm.
feel like something was wrong with me until I was diagnosed, and it made sense, and I started to feel compassion towards myself, understanding.
Thank you for so much for sharing that. San, let's talk a little bit about the day that you found out your son was diagnosed, and but let's take a step back into what were the elements of his behavior that caused you to think, let's check something out because something is just a little different, and I want to just kind of get to the bottom of how can I help him.
Actually, I never would have thought it was autism. Back in that time, growing up, we didn't know a lot about autism. We heard about autism and then Asperger's syndrome. And so of course now it's all ASD. It's entire spectrum. But Nico's first diagnosis was ADHD. And he had an incident at school, and it caused them to do a test, and he did test positive for ADHD. So I've had him in therapy since he was about 6 years old. And then by that fourth year, he got to be 10, I took him to a new therapist. And she said, "Have you ever had him tested for autism?" And I was like, "Of course not."
Hmm.
And I remember the hindsight being 2020, there was a special way he lined up all of his toys. There were certain toys that he played with that probably most children wouldn't play with. I learned and I saw he was very calculated in what he did, but he was very routine as well. You know what I'm saying? And
Hmm.
so when I got him tested, he tested positive. He tested high functioning, low spectrum. That was at 10 years old. And so then all of the puzzle pieces, amazing that puzzle pieces is the, theme for autism. All the puzzle pieces started coming together when he was 1 years old. He could not take getting his hair cut. We thought it was just he didn't like to get his hair cut, but it was actually the sound of the clippers, the sensory, and he could not stand things on his hands. So he was like the cleanest little child I knew. He had to hold things a certain way. He didn't like certain foods. My son didn't eat a French fry until he was 18 months. Didn't like candy. I found out later, of course, that it was texture and food sensitivity and all of those things that we now know are associated with autism. And so that day that I found out, as I've spoken before, I felt like I had failed him. I felt like it was something that I did. And then I found out, even though sometimes hard, that the journey has actually been beautiful because it also, when I started seeing his behaviors, it made me say, I struggled in these areas when I was in fifth grade. I struggled in these areas when I was in sixth grade. Maybe there is something wrong with me. And so then I got tested, and I was tested. I had adult ADHD. Now that I'm even older, I want to go back and get tested again to see if there is level one autism because I see a lot of the same behaviors. And they do say that a lot of children who have ADHD, it is because they are on the spectrum and that their ADHD diagnosis is actually within the spectrum.
Um, you brought up something that's very interesting, and I wanted to kind of park here just for a couple of minutes. When people hear the term spectrum or a child being diagnosed on the spectrum, there is an unfortunate misunderstanding of exactly what that is. And both of you know, and I actually have a godson that has been diagnosed with autism, and w- the culture has a way of almost using that term offensively, be it with a coworker or in the social setting, whatever. Oh, that person's on the spectrum. And I really want this program also to erase that, at least be a part of a discussion and larger discussion to erase that stigma. When we talk about a child being on the spectrum, be it level one or higher, I'm going to come back to you, Eileen. Can you, in layman's terms, let's talk about what is exactly the spectrum itself.
The autism spectrum, I mean, it just means that there are different levels of autism. Some people who have autism are going to have a lot more struggles than others. Like as a level one autistic person, I'm able to have a conversation with you right now. My oldest son, Charlie, who has level three autism, which is the most severe, it was level one, level two, level three, is nonverbal. He has, again, a severe intellectual disability. He has no sense of danger. Um, that's the spectrum. There are different levels. Some people have more strengths than others. Some people have more struggles. But I think what's important for people to know is that no matter how much someone struggles, everyone on the autism spectrum deserves to be loved and
Mhm.
accepted. And I think that's the message I would want people to take from that. Is it difficult to raise a child like my son Charlie, who again has no sense of danger, like eat non-edible items, will run in the street in front of cars.
Mhm.
You hear those stories about autistic kiddos who run away from home and then will be found in bodies of water because they're attracted to water but don't know how to swim. This is very sad, and it's an important part of the spectrum to talk about. But again, just because someone struggles doesn't mean they're not worthy of love or to be accepted. So that's how I would put the spectrum. Some people struggle more than others. Everyone is worthy of love and acceptance.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the areas that I'm going to park with Charlie's situation, or anyone with that higher level of disorder within that spectrum, there is. I love your ferociousness about ABA, and I see a little smile come across your face because in doing my research, there is a lot of opinions concerning is ABA effective? Is it fair? Is it too much? Is it not enough? What is your experience with ABA? And let's tell everybody what ABA actually is, not just about an acronym of ABBA, but what does it mean?
So the acronym is Applied Behavior Analysis, but that probably doesn't tell you much about what
Hmm.
it is. So what it is it's a therapy to help autistic children, children with disabilities, but let's be real, mostly autistic children, learn self care skills, independence, communication. And there's some controversy around ABA therapy. Some people think that teaching autistic people those skills is making them non-autistic, which is ableism, which I do not share that view at all. Like you mentioned, I think it's very important for autistic children to learn those skills. I mean, in ABA, my son Charlie learned to communicate basic needs using an AAC device. It's like
Hmm.
an app on his iPad that has little pictures, and when he clicks on the picture, it will say the sound. So, like, I want cookie. And I think that's so important for children with autism, even if they're nonverbal, to find a way to communicate. ABA can help with that. Again, my son has no sense of danger. He has something called pica, which is the urge of putting non-edible items in his mouth. He got a surgery to get a screw removed from his colon. He doesn't understand that even eating screws is dangerous. That's how little awareness of danger he has. He will run in the street. ABA can teach him to stop when we say stop. So if he's running in the street, I can at least catch up to him because he's really fast.
Hmm.
ABA has taught him how to brush teeth, how to get dressed, just little skills like that everyone deserves to learn how to use the bathroom, you know? And I don't think it's wrong to teach children these skills. Every child deserves to learn those basic skills for their own like independence and safety.
Yes, for those of us who have parents, I mean, who have children that are not on the spectrum as well. Yeah, those are everyday learning abilities that you teach them when they're little about doing such things. But as you said, for those with that higher level of or that profound autism, and they don't have that, and I just as you're talking, I'm just in my mind, I'm actually have pictures of my godson who is he has displays ADHD. Um, he he he'll run away. He'll just walk away from you. So we're constantly keeping an eye on his parents are constantly keeping an eye on him. He has things once again that I remember when he was little, he's now 13. Once again, his food could not touch. And there are things that he just did not like. But unfortunately, we found out a little bit later in his adolescence, because it was showing signs when he was 2, 3 years old and didn't know exactly what it was. And so you automatically think to yourself, oh, they're not just they're not they're not listening, or they need to be punished, or they need to be, maybe we need to get them in some type of other class or something, after school activity. But once, the deeper level of, let's find out exactly what's going on here, because some things are just not making sense. And when that happened, San has a motto that we are now using. We're both using through our joint venture with Autism Speaks. Is autism is a language, and once you learn the language, it changes everything. And that language is different for every child. It is not across the board. So, how you relate, Eileen, with Charlie with profound, as opposed to Jude, who's level 1, and how does Jude interact with his brother?
I mean, that's why it's a spectrum, right? So my son Jude is very similar to me. He's very vocal. He can talk, have discussion with you. He's actually gifted. Then there is Charlie, who's nonverbal, communicates with an AAC device, and is intellectually disabled. Yet they're both autistic. You see, I think they're the perfect example of why autism is a spectrum. And again, they're both very much worthy of love and acceptance. So Jude communicates with his brother. We try to talk to Charlie as if he understands us, and he does understand a lot more than he can actually communicate. The problem is that we don't get much feedback from him. He doesn't interact back with us. We still talk to him a lot. We ask him how he's doing. He can't even answer how are you doing. He can tell us when he wants specific food items though. So he will communicate with his iPad. I want cookie. I want chips. He's really into food. Um, but in the day-to-day lives, they don't really interact like you would other siblings do. They can't play hide and seek. They can't play video games. Charlie can't do any of that. Jude is really into soccer, and he always talks about how he wishes he had a brother who could play soccer with him. That's not something he gets. And I think we forget the siblings in this situation sometimes. Even though Jude has autism, again, his struggles are little compared to Charlie. Again, that's a controversial thing to say, but it's true. And it's difficult for him to not be able to connect with his brother. Charlie's the older brother on paper, but really in real life, Jude is the big brother. He's taking care of Charlie, helping him, feeding him, and I try to tell Jude not to take on that role because I don't want him to feel like he has to be a caregiver for Charlie, but he wants to do it because he loves his brother, and he wants to help him, and he wants to see him happy.
For you have 3 children, Charlie, Jude, and little Billy, little girl. Um, have you noticed any early signs of possibility with her, or right now you haven't noticed anything as of yet?
I did actually. She's very verbal now, but she's been in school for 1 year and she hasn't said a word at school yet, which is actually called selective mutism. So we were worried that it was going to be autism again, but at the same time, like she's always been very social. She does pretend play, and she didn't display a lot of the signs that Charlie and Jude did when they were younger. But the fact that she wouldn't say a word at school, still won't, was obviously red flag for me.
Mhm.
But she was evaluated a few months ago, and she scored pretty high, but still in a non-autistic category. So they just said it's anxiety related, that she's not talking at school, but is talking a bunch. Um, at home and they're not concerned. She just needs a little more time. But we were definitely watching very closely and yeah, hoping that she would develop a language, and she did.
Fantastic, fantastic, and I know you'll keep us updated on your blog because you have such a wonderful way of just conveying the challenges, the ups and downs, and even the bright spots as well. San, your son, who was diagnosed 10 years ago, his story is a little
Mhm.
different because now he is in college.
He is in college. He is actually in his third year of college, but doesn't it hasn't come without its challenges as well. In Nico's case, most of his issues are socialization. So he deals with heavy paranoia. You know, someone's always looking at me. Someone's always plotting against me. And just hearing Eileen's story, Nico has a older sister. I think she's probably in her mid to late 30s now, but she's also autistic. So from his father, so she is also autistic, and so I think understanding, and she's level 3. Well, she's level 2 because she's verbal, and but she has the development issues and things like that, and the lack of reality. That comes with some people on the spectrum. I think for me and Nico, I had to start looking at it as I look at anxiety and depression. My mother, as I say all the time, was a clinical psychologist, so I kind of had an advantage of mental illnesses and things like that. And so when I was diagnosed with depression in my early, I think, 20s or maybe 30s, and then I was diagnosed with anxiety in my 40s, in my late 30s, almost 40s, I said, I believe that any mental illness diagnosis that you have, it's all on the spectrum. I believe it's the same thing with anxiety and depression, that it's just it's a spectrum. When you're here, you're depressed. When you're here, you're anxious, and when you're here, you're in the middle, and you operate fine. And so I think, as Eileen said, everyone on any type of spectrum deserves the same love, the same attention, the same care. And I was even in my anger, you know, at Nico sometimes because I didn't understand his world, until I paid attention and said, I want to learn this language. It made everything much clearer for me. Then I began, instead of saying, nobody's looking at you, then I began to encourage him in a different way. Like, okay, maybe they're looking at you because they see how great you are, because they love your smile, because, they see you work out, and then he started accepting those positive affirmations. And I remember he used to say, don't say I have autism. God's going to deliver me from that. Right. And then, now pastoring a church 11 years later, and I have about 3 children with autism and about 3 adults in my church. Nico and I are able to be great advocates on both ends of the spectrum. So he is in his third year at Tennessee State University. Um, Studying computer science, which was great for the way he thinks in his mind. Because as I go back, he's been dealing with computers since he was 2 years old. It was strange. It was like, how do you know about this? And you're only 2 years old. How do you know how to crack open an iPhone? How do you know how to, And so, yeah, he knew. I didn't have to give him instructions for any computer, any phone, any iPad. He would crack that thing open starting from 2 years old. And then he was also, because of my background and his father's background, he has music. Nico, I listened to classical music when I was pregnant with him. And by the time he was 2 years old, he can hear Bach or Chopin or Beethoven, and he could hum it back exactly like he heard it. So I knew something was special, but I didn't know exactly what. So now, um, I know his triggers. You know what I mean? I know, and because he's also ADHD, and going back to something Eileen said, and I think you said as well, a lot of times when people don't understand autism and the life that comes with it, they think children are just bad. In our culture, we say they're just bad, they need a whooping. But he was also diagnosed with ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder. And as he grew up, we found out it wasn't so much the ODD as it was the autism. So if
Interesting.
you're not well versed, Yeah, yeah, because it was like he's just going to do the opposite. Well, in his world on that spectrum, it wasn't him just being defiant. It was a way of him conversing. It was a way of him getting attention. It was a way of him trying to explain what he wanted and what he did not want. So now that we educate ourselves, we continue to educate ourselves. Something came in an email from me yesterday, and I sent it to him, because he's almost grown now. So it's like, yeah, we should do this. We found out that there's a walk here in Tennessee for Autism Tennessee on Saturday. It's like we should do this. So we've come into a place of triumph, and where we have turned our story into helping other people advocate.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Eileen, there's something about your about section that I love, and I'm going to read just a little snippet of that. Um, and it says, "My patience is on back order, and I'm one sensory meltdown away from running off to live in a wine bar. But I show up anyway, raw, unfiltered, with a dash of sarcasm."
Whew.
Let's talk about what Sand touched on. It's hard sometimes, and it's
Yeah.
hard most times. How do you have your own self care? And you both can answer that. Let's start with you, Eileen. How do you self care to give yourself balance?
With the wine bar. No, just kidding. But I think it's important for parents to, take time for themselves when they need to, because you can pour from an empty cup. And often it's easier said than done, because finding the time to for self-care can be really difficult when you need to give. I mean, for me, it's like my son needs 24/7 supervision to stay safe. Thankfully, he goes to an amazing school right now. So that's why I'm doing this interview right now. That's how I can work, because I know he's safe in a very special school. But I think it's important for parents to make time for themselves. Again, you can pour from an empty cup, and you're going to be a better parent, more patient, if you recharge your batteries. That's something that I've learned is just as important as pushing through. Is if you need to take a step back, even sometimes like 10 minutes alone in a room, just like taking deep breaths, I mean, it's gonna make a big difference for me. Sometimes I just go sit outside in the backyard and I close my eyes, and that's enough to recharge me. But yeah, I really encourage parents, even if it's difficult, and I know again easier said than done, to take time for themselves. If you have a partner, try and make time with your partner too, to because it's hard, when you're raising a child with a severe disability, even just autism level 1. Sometimes you can lose yourself and you forget who you are, because you spend so much of your time just caring for another human being that, of course, you love so much, but it's going to affect you too. So take care of yourself.
Thank you for sharing that. San?
I totally agree. For me, because of the work that I do as a pastor and counselor and all that kind of stuff, I'm always giving out. So people think for self care for me is getting my nails done and my hair done. And I have to do that anyway because of, I'm always in the spotlight, always doing interviews, always on the stage. So self care for me is as simple as doing nothing at home. Watching TV, because I don't even watch TV, but that's something. Going to the water, or getting in my car and just driving to Walmart. It's just the simple things that we don't get to do, that self care that makes self care for us. Just reading, or scrolling, or just taking the time to breathe is self care for me. You know, and also I've noticed I have to take a break, and I know Eileen can definitely concur with this. I have to take a break from my son. I have to take a break from him on Sunday. I'm on sabbatical from my church for the month of September. I take a Selah, which is a rest every year in my birthday month. And most times I don't get to carry it out for the 4 weeks. And so I went to church Sunday and I just sat in the back, not as pastor, just as a parishioner. And my son was like, "Hey, are you going to take me home? Take me back to campus?" And I was like, "How did you get here?" And he said, "Well, I came with Eli." And I said, "Well, Eli and you live in dorms right across the way. You came with him, go home with him." He was like, "No, I want you to take me." No, he really wanted me to buy him something to eat.
Hmm.
And instead of just saying that, I said, "I'll get you something to eat." And he went on with Eli because I want to enjoy, these days that I have with myself. I mean, we talk every day, we FaceTime every day. I go and pick him up because he is close enough, for me to reach out to him, which was very important to me when picking his school because I wanted him to be far enough to feel independent, but I wanted him to be close enough for me to put hands on him because he was on the spectrum to make sure he was safe. So, however I can feel, okay, this is just for me, I take the moment. My self-care is moments. It's more moments than it is a planned out, calculated time.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Um, I'm going to bring up a topic that maybe you've all obviously thought about personally, maybe not necessarily expressed it, but let's talk about what your thought process is in terms of what happens to my child if something happens to me.
It's
What?
something that I think about
Go ahead, Eileen.
all. It's a question that, I mean, used to keep me awake at night. It's who other than me could take care of my son the way I do. Like, there's so many challenging behaviors and hard moments, but as a mom, it's easier because you love the child, that grew inside of you. It's part of you, right? um, who else could love him the way I do and take care of him the way I do? Who else is gonna, like you said, like understand all of the triggers, how to make him happy, the little like nonverbal signals, who? And that's something I don't have an answer to right now. What happens when that happens? Hopefully it's in many, 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 many years. But it's something that I think about a lot. You know, I think even best case scenario, finding like a facility where people are caring towards people like Charlie. I mean, it's obviously not the same as the love of a mother, and it's difficult. It's a difficult topic to think about, even financially. How? What's going to happen? It's not like Charlie's going to ever be able to get a job. So I think about it a lot. Yeah.
San.
I think about it too. Of course, not as much as I used to because Nico is 20. But I just trust God enough to know that I'll see my grandchildren and he'll get married. And, God will bless him with those people around him that if I should go, that he'll be in good hands. I just trust God that way. But I'm like Eileen. I could. Yeah, I used to not want to think about it because they do say that sometimes children with autism, their lifespan is shorter. But I just believe that Nico is smart enough, and I've instilled enough of myself in him for him to succeed if I'm here or if I'm not.
I brought that up for a reason because I actually want that to be a topic that when this podcast is over, that it's something to think about in terms of planning. I believe, be it if you have a child on the spectrum or any other type of severe disability, those are conversations that are hard to have. And so I didn't want it to get swept under the rug per se, but just to open up dialogue. Now, we're not saying we have the answers for ourselves, or nor we're saying we have the answers for you, for our listeners, but it is definitely an important one to do your research, your homework, and get the information that you need. And one thing I will say is if you go to autismspeaks.org, there are a lot of resources there available for you to be able to access that type of information and be of some assistance to help guide you in terms of aftercare should something happen to you. And those things can be done, preferably done ahead of time. Not that and I think I want to make sure sometimes when we're planning about when we're not here, we think if we plan about it, then something's going to happen to us. That's not the case. Um, but it gives you just the assurance that we have put our plan in place and we know the plan is a good plan, and the people and or facility, we've already done our homework, and we know that if something does happen, we can rest assured that our child or our loved one will be taken care of. I am really admire you, Eileen, because after having one child, to have more children, were you afraid of another child after Charlie? Or you weren't afraid and you said, the Lord will bless and God will bless and will give my husband and I exactly what we need to take care of however many children that he gives us?
I didn't know Charlie had autism when I was pregnant with Jude. Charlie was diagnosed during my pregnancy with Jude, so at that time I didn't know. Not it didn't cross my mind because I didn't know Charlie had autism yet. But Billy, I knew I had two children on the spectrum, and I mean, like I said, it was in the back of my head like for a long time. And as she grew up, I watched her like an oak. Is that the expression?
Mm-hmm.
Like a yeah. I was worried because I I knew I could handle whatever would have been put my way, but I was still hoping for a little break here, something a little easier. I mean, again, I guess it's controversial to say, but this is a hard life, and I think in the end, Billy was exactly what our family needed. I mean, she was like the perfect the missing piece to our family. She loves Charlie so much. I mean, if you just go look at the videos on my account, she like before going to school, like every day, she tells him like she loves him. And Charlie can't say it back, and she doesn't expect anything back in return. She just loves him so much, and yeah, she was she was meant to be in our family. That's for sure.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about that. And I know for you, Sam, Nico is your only son, but I
Yes.
know, but he is surrounded by. You have a large family, a very large family. So cousins and aunties and uncles, and so that having that support system for him, just in a familiar structure, I know is a great, great blessing for you.
Yes, it is. It is, and even though having a lot of family members, his condition allowed me to be able to. I have a nephew who he had a son, and I was like, his son was like 5 months old, and I'll never forget it. His son did. He was banging his head on my chest. He was like 5 months old. And it was something I said, this is not right, the way he was banging. And when he got about one, I told my nephew, I said, he's autistic. I said, you need to have him tested. And they had him tested, and he definitely was on the spectrum. He's a level one. And then his second son, same thing. I said, he doesn't make eye contact. He's not paying attention. He's not listening. He has no sense of danger. And I think King was like on two, and they went, and he is nonverbal, level two, and they're working with him, so he's now learning, things that he normally would not have learned had I not say, hey, you don't have to be embarrassed, get tested, and so they're travailing this and going along this trek very well. And so it makes you go back and look in your family history, it makes you go back and look in different things, and like, hey, this could have been that the entire time.
Hmm.
And then it makes you look forward, it makes you look ahead to say, hey, if you see it in another family member, it makes you more aware, it makes you more alert of what something could be and to act quickly.
Thank you. Thank you. This is, I could talk to you ladies for hours. I really could. But Eileen, I would love to invite you back onto our program at another time if your schedule permits. To delve more into how you handle the social media aspect of an amazing organization Autism Speaks, and what your experience is like in terms of the feedback. So we definitely want to schedule another show with you specifically about how that works, the interactions, and what you've been learning from the stories of other people as they've connected with the stories that you share. Definitely, this is an open invitation for sure, and I'll connect with James and everyone that Autism Speaks as well as yourself, and maybe we can schedule another program within the next few weeks to talk about that aspect of Autism Speaks.
That would be a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, and San, as always, thank you, my sister, for being here and for sharing your story. Thank you both ladies for being very transparent and allowing me to ask some questions, and it's not hard. They're hard questions, and maybe uncomfortable questions for a lot of people. But I wanted this to be the first of a series that we go and dive deeper. As we have been posting on Indigo Inspire Live of our collaboration with Autism Speaks, I'm profoundly honored just to hear the comments, the stories of there's one father in particular who has 5 children, and all 5 of his children are on the spectrum. Um, so just these stories and these questions, and I did promise them. I said, "Hey, we're going to have some answers for you." And when we finish this and get this all edited and everything, we're going to make sure we post a couple of your responses in that comment section, so it will be a help to them. So thank you so much, and thank you to our listening audience for being here on the new season of Indigo Inspire Live, and thank you to Autism Speaks for allowing Indigo Inspire to be a proud supporter of your amazing organization. So thank you all for listening, and we'll be back for another program next week. Take care.